Sergey I. Kislyak, who was the Russian ambassador to the United States until August, spoke with Michael T. Flynn in December 2016. Carolyn, KasterAssociated Press, Washington. Since it first emerged that Michael T. Flynn had repeated phone conversations last December with Russia's ambassador to the United States, one of the most significant unanswered questions has been what transition team officials and Donald J. Trump, then the president-elect, knew about the calls. The documents made public on Friday show that the transition team knew that Mr. Flynn was going to be discussing sanctions with the then ambassador, Sergey I. Kislyak, and raise new questions about what President-elect Trump knew about the conversations. Here are some key dates around the conversation and the subsequent follow-up that offer insight on what the transition team knew at the time. Dec. 29, 2016 Flynn consults with transition team, then calls Kislyak on the same day that President Barack Obama announced new sanctions against Russia in retaliation for interference in the 2016 election. Mr. Flynn called a senior member of the presidential transition team who was with other members of the team at Mr. Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort. Mr. Flynn and the senior transition official discussed what Mr. Flynn should relay to Mr. Kislyak about the new sanctions and what effect they could have on Mr. Trump's foreign policy agenda. Immediately after his call with the senior transition official, Mr. Flynn called Mr. Kislyak, according to court documents made public Friday. Mr. Flynn told the ambassador that Russia should not retaliate in response to the sanctions. In a subsequent call, Mr. Kislyak told Mr. Flynn that Russia had chosen to moderate its response to those sanctions as a result of his request. Court documents released on Friday as part of the special counsel's investigation shed light on Mr. Flynn's interactions with the then Russian ambassador, Sergey I. Kislyak. December 30, 2016 Putin declines to retaliate. The following day, President Vladimir V. Putin of Russia announced that Moscow would not retaliate against the United States for its latest round of sanctions, surprising some in the Obama administration who had expected an aggressive response from Mr. Putin. In response to Mr. Putin's announcement, Mr. Trump praised the Russian president. Great move on delay by V. Putin. I always knew he was very smart. Donald J. Trump at Real Donald Trump. December 30, 2016 Jan. 15, 2017 Pence says he is unaware of Flynn's discussions. Mike Pence, the vice president-elect who was the head of the transition team, has said repeatedly that he did not know that Mr. Flynn had discussed sanctions on the calls with Mr. Kislyak. Here is an interview that Mr. Pence gave to CBS News. Full interview. Mike Pence, January 15. Video by Face the Nation. Feb. 9, 2017 Flynn's conversation is revealed. Washington Post reported that Mr. Flynn had indeed discussed sanctions with the ambassador. In the days after that story, Mr. Pence read a transcript of at least one of the calls and saw that Mr. Flynn had misled him, according to lawyers briefed on the investigation. February 13, 2017 Flynn is fired. President Trump fired Mr. Flynn. Feb. 14, 2017 White House says Flynn violated president's trust. The following day, Sean Spicer, then the White House spokesman, said that Mr. Flynn had been fired for misleading Mr. Pence and other officials about what transpired on the phone calls with Mr. Kislyak. We've been reviewing and evaluating this issue with respect to General Flynn on a daily basis for a few weeks, trying to ascertain the truth, he said. We got to a point not based on a legal issue, but based on a trust issue, where a level of trust between the president and General Flynn had eroded to the point where he felt he had to make a change. The president was very concerned that General Flynn had misled the vice president and others.